Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen, wassalatu wassalamu ala Rasul Kareem. Alhamdulillah, we have gathered today on the 22nd of Ramadan in the year 1445 to discuss a trend and an issue among some of the believers in the West. In this discussion, we will be talking about extremism when it comes to adhering to the madhhabs. Now, as we know, Muslim orthodoxy has agreed on the four madhhabs, and they were also prophesied by the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. For those who'd like a more detailed discussion on the madhabs and their origin, you can refer to the recording we did on the Hanbali madhab, and I will leave the link in the description. Now, this current discussion of ours will not be about proving the validity of following madhabs. That matter should already be in place. The issue that we'll be tackling is about erroneous and extremist behaviors when it comes to adhering and implementing a madhab. So to start off, I'd like to first welcome back our teacher, Shaykh Abu Ja'far Al-Hanbali. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi ya Shaykh.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
I'd like to ask the following first. In Dar al-Kufr, we see many trends come and go among the Muslims. Now, such trends have different origins, but once such a trend is grabbed hold of, it becomes a norm and then believed to be correct among some of the believers. Now, one of those trends today, which we talked about, is the issue where many believers that claim a madhab, which is often joined with this Trinitarian statement, but they have lack of fiqh. Now, even though to claim a madhab is good and correct, but could you tell us why is it that when this is attached to a trend or the spirit of the age, that it does not bring about the same results as the Muslims have in the Muslim heartlands?
Alhamdulillah. Alhamdulillahi wa kafa. Wassalatu wassalamu ala man la nabiyya ba'da wa ba'd. Alhamdulillah. So, in discussing this issue where people are engaged in partisanship or ta'assub with the Arabic term, this is happening in Dar al-Kufr, where Muslims will reside or they've been born there. Part of the reason why this happens is there will be a speaker or a few speakers that will usually be charismatic. Those speakers will then push a particular aspect of Islam. And by pushing a particular aspect of Islam, not in its fullness, they'll become fixated on a particular trend. They then become fixated on that, and they polarize a group of people around them that become fixated on it.
Mm.
This fixation then leads to people building understandings on that fixation. So it was, you mentioned the spirit of the age. There were spirits of the age before this time where you must have bay'ah with a sheikh. So that was the spirit of the age. And that's all there was to it.
Mm-hmm.
People didn't have, you couldn't really have conversations with people in a balanced manner. You had people who were doggedly opposed to the degree of fanaticism, and then people that were doggedly for it to the degree of fanaticism. But then it faded, and then the new spirit was introduced, right? So you had a spirit of the age regarding the Mawlid, where you had people, if you ask people today, they'll say, we never said that, but then you'll go back, you'll produce the proofs, you'll go in the Wayback Machine on the internet, you'll show it. Or there were people that said that commemoration of the Mawlid is wajib. And they were responding to some people saying that it was haram. So there were people that went to extremism, oh yes, it's wajib, and it must be. Then you had people who, there were the arguments in the 90s about da'if hadith, and you had these two extreme camps. No, they're haram to use, you can never use them. And then no, they're fine, they must be. There were just extremes. Now, what all of these spirits of the age, what they all have in common is the people that engage in the two poles of thinking, for or against. There's not a knowledge-based principle. People they join a camp because they're impressed by a particular speaker, or someone has impressed them in a certain manner. Maybe it's the way they spoke or whatever else. There's not evidence behind it. So even when it's a case where it's something that's permitted that people become fanatical about, They won't have evidence for the fanaticism
Oh,
and not evidence for the thing. So they'll start identifying with the thing, but they don't have the characteristics. So the people that were obsessive about the Mawlid, they don't even have the texts or understanding when the Mawlid appeared, why, and why people used
subhanallah.
it. They don't have those things, but they know that because I identify with given individual or the given individual public speaker, I'm with him. He's my friend, or he's someone I hold in high regard. That's it now. There's no text behind it. There's no reasoning. And it's not based in any knowledge-based set of principles. So it becomes dogged, it becomes extreme, it becomes irrational at times, and it sets them apart because then when they're faced with people who are from Ahlus-Sunnah wal-Jama or within Muslim Orthodoxy that don't do the said thing, or they express moderation in the given thing that's outside of the fanaticism they've attached, then they assume, okay, these people must be astray. But the next level of it is if they find a big enough opposition to their position, and they say, well, those people don't know, or they have to re-explain it, or they go through kind of a crisis
Right.
because they've built so much on this particular spirit of the age that they're in, that this is all there is to it. It's this or nothing. And when people become obsessed with that, they often get into these obsessions, and the obsessions harm the rest of their religion. So they'll have one thing that they harp on to the exclusion of everything else. So you'll find people that get caught on one issue and become obsessed with it, that they're sometimes not very moral people. So they might engage in fornication or drug taking, or they beat their wives and children. But they have this one issue that they obsess on, and that's it. But those people won't have akhlaq. They won't have good manners. They won't know how to look after the believers, the people that get obsessed with the Dawah movement. They don't know anything about fiqh, or they don't know anything about tajweed.
Yes.
They don't know anything about, but that one fixation, if you spoke with them about that one area that they'd fixated on, that they polarized on, you would think that they were high level people the way they talk about it, because that's the one issue they know and nothing else. Not fiqh, not tafsir, not i'tiqad, not hadith. They've just fixated on that one thing. And the entire ummah is now duty bound to do this entire thing. And because they found this issue, or they're upon this issue, until everyone in the ummah is on this issue, they're astray, or they're missing out, or they're really not at their best. So they then start developing a low opinion of the ummah, because the entire ummah is not following it the way that they would have it be done. And because of that, they have suspicion towards the ummah. So that's where I would say a lot of the issues regarding the spirit of the age, that type of thinking comes from.
So normally, when a believer is educated in ilm, either this would happen at your home or the local masjid and the like, you would learn your fard al-ain, which would include theology, fiqh, ihsan. One, it is taught in this manner, which is structured. One does not have its origins from a trend. So this results in a complete different way of also then teaching and preaching the religion, right? Compared to taking this from the origin as being a trend.
Yes, because the people that are learning in a very structured manner, they're learning, and as they're learning, they're also being taught about the rest of the ummah. So they're understanding that they're not one exclusive group themselves, but they're part of a visible, large body of believers that are in the billions throughout the world.
Right.
And within that, there will be branches of them that they have their particular preference, or a particular jama'ah of Sahaba and Tabi'een that they've been following from time immemorial. And that is their methodology. But they will be aware of other methodologies besides themselves. They will be aware that there is difference of opinion about these matters. And because they know that, they'll know how to navigate when these differences of opinion present themselves. And they'll know how to avoid, in the course of having ikhtilaf, jidal and khusumat. So in the course of having ikhtilaf, a difference of opinion, you have to be able to avoid disputation, debating, and argumentation. They'll know how to navigate those things so that you can coexist together. And so that you can work together, because having the ittifaq al-jama'ah, the agreement upon being in jama'ah, takes precedence over the debates and argument and everything else. And this is why ikhtilaf, the etiquettes of it, the adab al-khilaf, the etiquette of differing has its principles. And these are things that you'll be taught when you're learning in a structured manner. If you do not, you don't learn these etiquettes. So what they'll do is they'll adopt the cultural aspect of the country around them, which is there can only be one right answer per mas'ala. And that's it. And because of that, they don't know how to think clearly. So they develop extreme and often bizarre positions.
Mm-hmm. Yes. And do you think whenever these trends begin spreading in a local region or someplace, is it generally spread by ignorant people themselves, or can it also be a mistake by some of those who have misinterpreted what the Sheikh said, for example? How this can begin?
It can at times be by ignorant people who have latched on to something. So something becomes very popular. Now you have two eras that I'll mention briefly, because we have the social media era and the pre-social media era. Pre-social media era, people might start popularizing a particular spirit or trend of a time because someone came back from Hajj and Umrah and or Umrah. And they saw something that they hadn't seen in their own region, and so they just start copying it. And they say, well, I was on Hajj and Umrah. This is where Islam, this is where the Quran was revealed.
Yes.
So they couldn't be wrong. So now we've got to implement this here. And they become partisan to it. Or they visited Al-Masjid al-Aqsa and Al-Qubat al-Sakhra, the Dome of the Rock. They visited there and they thought, I saw this happening before the Adhan or during the Adhan. So we must do this here because after all, those people are in the Holy Land and therefore this must be implemented. Or a Muslim brother might visit those countries. He may or may not be a student of knowledge. He'll visit some area of Dar al-Islam. And then he'll come back energized with whatever he's learned or whatever he saw. And then he'll bring that into his local area. And he'll either polarize people around it, or people could take from that particular individual and start becoming polarized around a particular issue, start to become fanatical. This is pre-social media. In the social media era, what happens is people will be sharing videos. And in particular, the shorter the video, the easier it is to share. So you'll have between a 30-second to 60-second video, and they'll share that. And that could be shared across Twitter, now known as X. It could be shared across Snapchat. It could be shared across TikTok, YouTube Shorts, whatever it may be. They'll have that 30 to 60-second short, and then they'll send that across. And what happens is you get people that belong to communities of people that they're signed up to. And when it circulates within that community of people and begins to be shared over and over again, it starts to what's called now go viral, where you got 1 million followers, 500,000 people that have seen it, 1 million people have seen it, and then it starts being posted in other areas. And some of the Muslims that see that, when that happens, they take the fact that that post is popular as a proof of the popularity of the thing in question. Exactly. So because I've seen this everywhere, it's something that Muslims as a body globally are all doing. Exactly. So then they become particular on that thing. But within 30 to 60 seconds, that's not enough time to learn something per se. But they become polarized around it, then they insist upon it without any knowledge of the said thing. And when they go to try to enforce it, either in their family or their local community or local masjid or whatever, or their friend group, it causes all this rancor. And they mistake the rancor and the division that it's caused. Oh, well, this is what the prophets went through, that their people, alayhim as-salam, pushed against them, and they had to remain steadfast. And they start reciting Surah Al-Asr and saying, MashaAllah, I'm following that hadith, wa tawasaw bil-haqq wa tawasaw bis-sabr, and alhamdulillah, they enjoin with truth, and then they enjoin with patience when they suffer difficulties. Alhamdulillah, that's me. And they start thinking that it's them, when in reality, no, they're actually the ayat and ahadith that go with them are the ayat and ahadith about people of fitna and people of tribulation, and that those people must be opposed. Like those actual ahadith, like those are the ones ayat that are used for them. But because they've introduced something that's new, they've grabbed onto it. And especially when you look at people who have done these shorts over whichever platform, when they use the shorts and they employ visually pleasing art or visually pleasing camera angles. And then there'll be either background music or nasheeds or other things. They'll highlight or shade. They'll use certain types of shading, or they'll use a theme in Photoshop called stroke. They'll stroke the words a certain way to where they pop out and they're very large. Those things have an impact on some people that see them.
And they'll be extremely emotional, which then also stirs the emotion in other people as well.
Yes, and so other people, well, why would he lie? You know, he's look at how powerful what he's saying, and you won't be complete having one of those 30 to 60-second shorts. No. You won't be complete without someone swearing by Allah on the truthfulness of what they say. It won't be complete without that. And once someone sees that, oh, subhanallah, he's got the right shading, the background music, he's yelling as well, which is another thing. They associate yelling with truth. And then they swear by Allah as well. Oh, he swore by Allah. Well, subhanallah, he can't be lying. But not realizing in the Quran, وَقَاسَمَهُمَا إِنِّي لَمِنَ النَّاصِحِينَ, right, not realizing that as shaitan, he was the first one to swear by Allah and lie. But they'll say, well, that's it. Right? وَقَاسَمَهُمَا, shaitan, he swore to both of them. He made qasam. So, but when people will see these videos, they'll say, no, this is true. This person's yelling, so he's obviously emotional because he believes in what he's saying. Look at the taqwa in him. And if the camera angle is right, their face might be illuminated. So they'll say, subhanallah, look at the nur on his face. Look at the nur. So then that becomes an extreme as well. And so, okay, so now he's got the nur on the face. They've got the subtitles flashing on the screen that are either stroked or have afterglow highlight. Then they've got the background music. The person's sworn by Allah. That's it. It's finished now. And sometimes they might not even be quoting like a full ayah. The individual in that short will quote like a section of an ayah. Or he'll quote a particular section of a hadith. And that's it. People will build an entire understanding on it. And then it causes this fanaticism and trouble. And the social media, the partisanship that comes from the social media is often more difficult to deal with than pre-social media. And the reason for it is because pre-social media, if people came from Hajj or Umrah or something like that, you could refer it back to other people that had been that say, okay, listen, when you see this, it's because of this ruling or whatever else. There's a difference of opinion. It's not across the board. You have other people that have also been there or also studied. But with the social media trend, you don't always refer it back to people. You don't necessarily have conversations about what you saw. You just share them. And so when you share them, then people also share them in their group. And the point of discussion or argumentation doesn't happen until after it's been shared. Whereas before social media, someone would come back, like if they came back from Mecca and people were praying salah in the masjid, and a Muslim brother that came from Umrah, he hears the Imam make takbir, Allahu Akbar, and going to ruku'. Then he makes the takbir, he does the takbir behind it, Allahu Akbar. Right? After the salah, brothers will gently correct him and say, why did you do that? Well, when I was in Mecca, that's what they had. They had the people do that, and that's the sunnah. No. That the takrir that's being done is because of the sheer enormity and size of a Masjid al-Haram. So the ashab al-takrir, the people that repeat, are there to repeat it so that everyone in the masjid can hear it. Right? That's what that's there for. The same thing that sometimes when the Dome of the Rock is very full, they'll have the same people, but not always. So you ask the same people, wait a minute, when you were there, when you did your visit, you went on your holiday, did you go to Jami Bani Umayyah? Yes, I went there. Okay. When you were there, and did you attend any class? Well, I sat in on a couple of things. I didn't understand all of it. Okay. When you were there and the sheikh mentioned a particular point from the kitab, and then he had someone do takrir of it down the hall, did you copy that? No. Why? Why? He's repeating there. Why did you take away that the act of takrir of Allahu Akbar and Salah, that's something that's definitely a sunnah, but not when the sheikh repeated it there? Or Salat al-Maghrib at Jami Bani Umayyah, where they've got the men standing in a group of 10 or 6 or 7, depending on the day, and they're all wearing red tarbushes, and they're repeating the words of the muezzin outside. Why didn't you do that when the adhan was being made? You see, so there's a selectivity as well of what they think.
Exactly.
what is partisan, right? So you can correct those things because you're now in a group, you're in the masjid, you're in your family, you're around other people. With social media, they just share it. So there's not this conversation. You saw something, you were touched by it, you were impacted. Okay, man, I need to share this. And they just share it. So then the real discussion doesn't happen after the initial point of contact. The discussion then starts after 1 million people have seen it, 500,000 people have seen it, 300,000 people have seen it. The discussion's coming after at that point. It wasn't had at the initial point of contact. Otherwise, if it had the discussion happened at the initial point of contact, you could have nipped it in the bud at that point. But because it didn't, and it was now 300,000, 400,000, 500,000, 1 million, now it's way down the line. And now people start building their lives around it. They start taking stances on it and positions that they don't know anything about. So then it becomes extremely difficult to correct it after that point.
For example, one of the things people have asked me is, and even all the way from the Caucasus, Ingushetia, my country, my family has been sending me this as well. So a couple people sent me a link where a particular individual, he is stating that it is a bid'ah to say Ma sha Allah or Ma sha Allahu la quwwata illa billah, Ma sha Allah tabarakallah. He's saying it's a bid'ah to say this. And he said you should only say Allahumma barik fi because there is no authentic narration talking about Ma sha Allah. But we find in the Kutub of Adhkar by Imam Suyuti and Nawawi, they do mention this. So a lot of people then just watch this clip because this guy is not providing evidence. He's just saying it's an innovation. And people are sending me that clip, and even all the way from my country, people are asking me this thing. So now what's happening is what I'm seeing is among my people, particular, is a lot of them are refraining now from saying mashallah. They say only Allahumma barik, only that. So to them, no one has given them really evidence. It's just a wildfire that spread saying that's not allowed. It's an innovation.
And all it takes is for someone to make a declaration like that. So they're in some yelling video. So they're yelling. There's the background music of the nasheeds, and they're swearing by Allah, this is haram to do. And then that's it. But they didn't give any proof. And it's like, well, wait a minute. You don't argue from the standpoint of saying, well, where's your proof that it's not haram? No. You have to give the evidence that it is. Because when it comes to the book of transactions, which is covering buying, selling, eating, drinking, social discourse, and interaction, the assumption of the great majority is the assumption is aslul ashya al-ibaha. The origin and consideration of things is that they're permitted until definite proof is given otherwise. So you have to give the proof that doing this is haram or doing these things are impermissible. You've got to give the proof for the said thing. But some of the slaves of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, they get intimidated when someone is yelling and swearing by Allah. And usually they'll sometimes also, oh, if I'm lying, may Allah strike me down. They use all these types of, these are intimidation tactics that are designed to terrorize your mind. But if you have a carefully thinking mind, when someone says, oh, well, you know, if I'm lying, Allah curses you. Well, if you're lying, then Allah's already cursed you, so you don't have to call it down. And I don't accept people taking qasam before they've been asked to. Why? Because there's a hadith in the Sahih of a Muslim where the Prophet ﷺ, he said, the best generation is my generation, and those who come next and those who come next. Then a time will come in which people will come making oaths when they were not asked to, bearing witness before they were asked to, taking oaths before they were asked to. Right? So when I see people doing this, I immediately say, well, this person is probably not being truthful, or they're using this as a mechanism, because they know that in general, Muslims consider when someone takes an oath, they consider that person truthful. And yet, in general, that can be truthful, but you have to be careful when people use it as a mechanism to stop conversation or to stop you asking questions. So, okay, well, I swear by Allah, such and such. Okay, that's fine. You know, well, I don't accept your qasam. Where's the evidence for this again? And it's often quite jarring for other Muslims where I've done this, where they're like, Akhi, he swore by Allah. Yeah, and he can swear 70 times, but I want the proof for this. And it's very difficult for people to deal with it. But when you break that taboo, when you break that taboo, and some of these taboos, they should be broken, because by not breaking these taboos, you kind of become an accessory for the spread of partisanship. I'll give another example regarding social media. People will often circulate aqwal that are unsourced. And because they're unsourced, people might like it because the background has a mountain in the background or there's a beautiful sunset, and people will assume that that's the way it is. And oh, look at how beautiful it is. Why would someone make that and lie? It's like, well, for the same reason that the Nazis lied about things, for the same reason the Stalinists lied about things. If you see the original selected works of Joseph Ilyinich Stalin, the covers are beautiful. Mein Kampf, its original covers are beautiful. So let's not do this thing of where, oh, why would they lie and do that? They would. They would. The Ahlul Bid'ah, the Mu'tazila, they lie. Right? The Khawarij, they lie. I've particularly said, I said, listen, if you get sent something or if something comes up and there's no evidence for it, don't circulate it. Don't circulate it. If someone just says the Prophet ﷺ, he said, and there's no takhrij for it, anything else, don't circulate it. Don't circulate it and then ask me or ask someone else, hey, is this? No, don't give it life. Don't give it life. Because Abdullah Sufyan al-Qudumi, rahimahullah, the late Imam, he said, I found books that had been mass printed and they had ahadith that were wrongly voweled. And because they were wrongly voweled, it was changing the meaning of those ahadith, which counts as kadhib. So the people that are doing this fall under the ruling, whoever lied against me intentionally, let him take his place in the fire. He said it falls under that ruling. He says no one should be transmitting or circulating ahadith unless they're from legitimate sources. They must be stopped. So he actually closed down a printing press. He went to the house of someone and like stopped them. Like, these things, they have to be done. So on social media, if some things are being said, don't circulate it. Just don't. If there's a statement that's attributed as a hadith or something, you don't know the source for it, do not circulate it. A brother sent me something about, and then sometimes the things that get circulated are things that are contrary to Ahlus-Sunnah wal-Jama altogether, like things that lie about, like Sawm. If someone did Salat and Salam on the Prophet ﷺ blank many times, that's more than his Sawm and everything altogether. And people will take from that, oh, okay, so even if I don't fast in Ramadan, I just do this.
Yes.
No, that's not what, right? But people have jumped and done that.
Indeed.
And I found people have at times made quotes from Imams. And those quotes, that's not in the original Arabic. That's actually not in the original Arabic. So I've gone back. People have sent me things. Oh, yes, Ibn Jawzi, he said this.
Exactly.
Like, no, he didn't. No, he didn't. Yeah, he did, because my Maulana, well, your Maulana is either a lying fasiq or the person that taught us is a lying fasiq. But he did not say this. I have that book. He did not say that. Well, why would someone translate? I don't care and I don't know. But the point is that that's not what he said. Stop circulating it. Well, the brothers and I really benefited from that. We got a lot of, no, you didn't. Because the condition for doing istifada of the thing is the thing in itself must be mufid that you're doing istifada of. You can't do benefit from something that doesn't have benefit in it before you know what the benefit is and you say, I benefited from it.
Yes.
This is the real big disease that people have. Oh, yes. I've benefited a lot from such and such or such.
Indeed, yes.
You don't even know what the benefit is. So how can you be taking benefit when you don't know whether it's beneficial or what's been taken from it? Don't do that.
Or some people say, I only take the correct things. But the thing is, if you haven't studied the ilm, how do you know what's correct and incorrect?
Yes, how do you know what's correct or incorrect? Well, I chew the meat and spit out the bones. Okay, wonderful. So you use these little clever analogies. What if a bone gets in your throat and you choke to death? What about that? Because let's use the same analogy. Okay, well, what if you swallow the meat and there's a bone hidden in there and you choke to death? Because some of the stuff that's out there are bones that will get caught in your throat and you'll choke to death.
Or want to say, it feels good, like I have a good feeling when I hear this, or I follow my gut. These type of arguments.
Yes, these type of arguments have also hidden dangers, because when they do that, or they say, when I looked at his face, look at the nur on his face, it's like, yeah, that could be camera angling. No, that could be a filter. Oh. You don't follow. We've all read the news stories about people that they thought they were marrying a particular woman that looked a certain way, and then when he arrived on the day, he found it wasn't like that, or he woke up the next morning, he pronounced talaq upon the woman. So let's not fall in line with the filters and let that happen.
Right.
Pay attention and be sober-minded. when these things are being sent to you, because those things can spread fanaticism. And so
Yes.
that's part of what makes the social media era different to the pre-social media era, is the conversation about the particular fanaticism and partisanship would usually happen at the point of contact. Now it's not happening at the point of contact. It's happening far after the thing has become popularized, which makes it harder to lift. It makes it harder to rebalance people, because people start taking stances. So those who are opposed, they start taking a stance. Those who are for, they start taking a stance. And it's hard to lift it once that's happened. It's really, really difficult to lift it.
Now, those who have studied their fundamentals of the deen, they can differentiate between a genuine fiqh issue and a trend. However, like you've said, if someone, he or she has not studied fiqh, let's we'll talk about mu'amalat and ibadat, they haven't studied it fully, so they're not sure what it's wrong or right. So in this case, they shouldn't first and foremost circulate it.
Yes.
And secondly, they should consult, right, with someone who has the knowledge.
Yes. What happens in those circumstances is those slaves of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the first thing they should do, don't circulate it and then ask later about it. Don't do that, because that's irresponsible.
Yes.
The first thing you do is you sit down on that particular thing. You hold it, and you should tell the people that are circulating to, listen, don't stop sending these things around without any evidence. Stop doing that. Well, we've only got a limited number of characters. With a limited number of characters, don't put it in. Maybe that's the sign from Allah that you shouldn't be circulating. Do not send this. The same thing that brothers will put up fatwa. They'll put up a fatwa, and the fatwa, because they've only put in the end result or some part of the fatwa, it can look like the most stringent statement, but it's not intended by the imam that wrote that rule. But it just gets put across. So you tell people, listen, don't do this. Then the next thing is, you need to ask other people that can access the sources or access to this particular data or this ruling of this kitab. I found this today. Is this sound, or have you heard of this hadith, and what collection is it from? Then they try to source it. Yes, this hadith is this, but what it's being used for, what you mentioned, that's not what the intent is of that hadith, right? Or that's not the background of that hadith. Or this fatwa or this statement of this scholar, that's actually not in context. He didn't even intend that at all. That's not what he said, right? So you have to make sure that when you find these things, as a responsible believer, that you use your phone or your computer or whatever you use to circulate social media, you have to use it responsibly, because you lead the way in partisanship if you don't. And there's all types of tribulation that can happen.
And just as a side note as well, since we mentioned some of these fiqh issues and trends, one of those very big trending issues today is the boycotting issue. So most of the people, or say everyone I've spoken to who has told me we must boycott, none of them knew the fiqh mas'ala from a book of fiqh, nor did they know a hadith source for this. There's nothing. There's just everyone's doing it. We must do it.
Yes, and it becomes something partisan, where when people that are involved in these particular trends, especially this one you've mentioned right now, because this is the hot one right now, if they find out that you're not doing it, they make bara from you as if you're a fasiq.
Yes, exactly.
And they start to hold you in contempt, or they say that you don't care about the Muslims, or that this person is astray because we've told them about this. They start holding you in contempt, or you lose your adala, like your standing of being just, because yes, I was with so-and-so and I used to respect that brother, but then when I found out that he didn't do this, I lost respect for him. It's like, okay, loss of ihtiram is really serious, because if you say you don't have ihtiram for someone, like respect for someone because of this, it means that, like with respect to ghiba, like it's permitted to warn against them for ghiba because they're spreading innovation or they're a rebellious sinner and all these other things. People have become partisan to this issue. And in the 30 years ago, it was like this for the issue with making takfir on the rulers. If someone ran across you and they were of the people that were partisan to takfir on all of the rulers and all of the 48 majority Muslim countries, if they found out that you didn't hold that they were kuffar, they held you, oh, you have irja, like you're like the murji'ah, you're in furqa, and they held you to be like those people. Like, yes, you have irja in your heart. There's nifaq in your heart. You don't have the aqidah of the Sahaba because you see kufr and you don't call them kafir when they're doing kufr. You yourself are kafir for not calling a kafir. It became really dangerous, and there was violence where people were assaulted, families were broken up. So this type of thing is really serious, and this is one of the hot button issues right now that people are using the BDS movement. They're using this as, if they're not using it as kufr and iman, they're using it like ijma, non-ijma. So they're acting as if you're violating one of the mabadi, one of the usul of the deen, by not engaging in this thing. And when you ask them, well, because I've seen people in these situations, when they get asked, I've kind of looked on and watched. When they've asked them, they've not responded with, okay, this ayah, this hadith. They've said, how could you not do this? Don't you see what's going on? No. Don't you understand? But okay, so now it's getting emotional now.
Indeed.
And so now we've left from evidences, we've left from texts, we've left from that, and now it's become just a knee-jerk reaction that involves, don't you see, can't you understand, don't you understand what we've got to do, do you watch the news, where are you, aren't you paying attention to what's going on in the world? And then there'll usually be some oath, I swear by Allah, you are so weak in your iman, or you've got to do this, or I swear by Allah, this is the only way, this ummah's finished, and this is the only way that we can do this. And people will make these statements about the entire ummah. The ummah's finished, or the ummah's destroyed, or the ummah's fallen, or these types of things about the ummah, not realizing the gravity of what it is, because some of those statements can be kufr, yanqilu al-millah, that remove you from the religion. But because they're saying it, I hope that they're jahil and ignorant, and they don't understand. But these issues that lead to partisanship, that they become established upon, it becomes something that this is what we're doing, this is what we're on. And then when they find others that are not, now what's happened is, as I mentioned before, there's not a point of contact anymore. So they've become established upon an issue in a large body of people, and then they're looking to meet the people that aren't established upon that thing.
Yes.
Because in order to have the two poles must meet in order to oppose one another. So they have to look. It's no point being in a group where we all agree. You can't be partisan then. So you have to meet someone that is not that thing. So then when you meet someone that's not, so now you begin to use clever titles for that person, or you start to use bad language for that person, because now that person justifies your existence for opposing them. Yes, don't be like so-and-so people who they're like this and this and thus and so. Be serious with your deen. Be established on your, don't be a munafiq, right? Don't be this, do this. And that's where the partisanship, it takes that really serious turn.
Also, what I've noticed is some of the students of knowledge that get dragged along these trends, unfortunately, because they're involved in this emotional trend, they start doing proof texting. Now, if you remember, I sent you a text, some people quoting from the Masail by Imam Ibn Hani, the Masail of Imam Ahmed, where there's a statement on boycotting the enemy, which is then referring in warfare and enemies that are destroying and waging war against the Muslims. But then taking that out of context and applying it to general, anyone from that location, the common people here and there. So then even the students of knowledge, when they get dragged into it, they start abusing the text as well.
Yes, because they start thinking that BDS is the same thing as embargo. Embargo and the boycott, divestment, and sanctions are two very different issues. And embargo is where you're actually preventing the enemy from getting weapons and things that would nourish him, like food and drink. You're actually stopping them from getting them, either by blocking their ports or doing other things. There's no relation between that and someone that says, I'm not buying this cake frosting because the cake frosting was made in such and such country. Those two, they're not related at all. And more importantly to that is that book of Masail from Ibn Hani, that text is normally studied alongside of other kutub. That's not what you use for just,
Exactly.
you don't put that on your shelf and then pull it down as
No.
like a regular person and say, let's see what I'll use today.
Mhm.
That's not what that's used for. There are day-to-day kutub of fiqh or day-to-day kutub of ahadith that have been specifically written for regular people.
Yes.
But that, the Masail of Ibn Hanbal, Masail of Ishaq ibn Rahawayh, or the Masail of Abu
Mhm.
Bakr al-Athram, that's not why that's written.
Mhm.
There's a particular stated aim and purpose for those kutub. So when you see slaves of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala do that, it doesn't take much except for someone to examine the context very carefully, usually read it in the original language, and then you realize, wait a minute, this has nothing to do with this. Of course it's not. Of course it's not. But in the emotion that they've gotten involved in, and they feel pulled into this movement, and usually the language comes, we've got to do something. Okay, well, you should find out what you're supposed to do then.
Mhm.
Don't just see this, what's happening, and say, we've got to do something. Well, that might not be the something that you've got to do. It may be something else that you need to do. The same thing with the demonstrations. When the things happened regarding Sham, and I published Ismail Badran, the Imam Hafidahullah, when I published his statement, the same thing with Faris, Shaykh
Mhm.
Faris al-Khazraji. Like I published both of
Yes.
those because of understanding the background and the usul behind these things.
I'll put them in the description, inshallah.
And what's happened to those people is because of the emotional aspect that they've had, they've said, well, we don't accept those. Like, wait a minute. These are people, like Imam Ismail Badran is actually from the place where these things are happening. And so he's witnessing it real time. So he's not just a marja, but he's actually from the places where this is happening. Sheikh Faris al-Khazraji is a faqih, and he's from Iraq when these things, like he was there under the Saddam era. He was there during these real hotspot issues. And he's a student of Sheikh Al-Hamadani, the late marja. So if there was something that could have been found to justify all of this behavior and all of the things that are being done, they would have said.
Yes.
They would have said.
Exactly.
And so we have to be balanced, because even during the height of the Syrian civil war, which is not at its height, there are still embers that are cooling. At its height, there were more than 40 marajah that came out with a fatwa against the demonstrations and everything else. 40 marajah across the different madhhabs in Sham. 40 that signed it. And I remember reading that, and people would say, no, we've got to go forward. We can't be listening to that. It's like, okay, there's a disconnect then between ilm and knowledge.
Exactly.
And now the slaves of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that were partisan on that issue, now they weep and cry and say, if we had it to do again, we wouldn't have done it. That's what they were telling you about, though. That's what they were telling you about before. The same thing with Imam al-Buti rahimahullah, where he came out around the same time that came out, because he's one of the signatories to those 40 marajah. He came out like around the same time, because when he made his statement, all types of filth was attributed to him. Oh, he's in bed with the government. He's murji. He is an alim al-sulta, all this stuff. But now all of a sudden, those same people that had made takfir and things like that, they've come around and said, oh, the shaheed, the speaker of truth. Wait a minute, hold on. Why is he the shaheed and speaker of truth now? I thought you were saying his manafiq before and everything else. Because now they've realized, but it's like it's too late because so much damage has been done. And this is why our imams then and now warn us about this issue of partisanship and ta'assub and these, because of the inherent dangers that are in it. And it becomes no more dangerous, not just in i'tiqad matters, but it becomes dangerous in fiqh. Because fiqh is an everyday thing that the believers are constantly using. And when you create this fitan in fiqh, then it makes it to where you break up the jama'ah of the believers in masjids, if they're at university, if they're at ilmi gatherings, if they're in the home where you divide families. It creates incredible fitan. And the slaves of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that can become deluded during that time, they just insist, well, we're just doing our level best with spreading the truth. But you're not spreading the truth if you don't even know what you're spreading on the background behind it.
Yes.
So you're actually not spreading the truth. You're actually poisoning people. If you're killing people with penicillin, you can't say, well, I'm just prescribing penicillin. Yes, but you're killing people with it. You are not the people that are supposed to be prescribing penicillin. Let the people that know what they're doing to prescribe, let them do it. You don't understand the medicine. And this is how people need to understand that sometimes medicine can kill people. It's medicine, but it can kill people if they have an allergic reaction or they're taking a dosage higher than they're supposed to. There's ayat and ahadith or aqwal that if you misapply them, you can hurt yourself. Not because the truth isn't there. It is. But you're misapplying things. Then you go astray. Then you get hurt. And then why is Allah doing this to me? Why is this happening? You know, this really affected my iman. It put a lot of doubts in my heart. Why would it put doubts in your heart? You're the devil that did this to yourself. It's nothing to do with Islam that caused this. You did this because you shot too far over the mark, or you overexalted yourself, and then you exaggerated into some affair to the degree that you've now separated between yourselves and your family. And now that your family's vomited you out, or you're not welcome at the masjid because you got kicked out, or people avoid you, now you're putting this thing across where, well, the prophets were persecuted and they remained steadfast. You're not a prophet. But more importantly, you're actually on the wrong side of the conversation. But slaves of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then and now, some of them don't learn unless it's after the fact. And that's unfortunate.
SubhanAllah. And Sheikh, what we're basically seeing here is that there is just, and especially looking at the Muslims from Dar al-Kufr, that there's just this great disconnect between them and the ulama, meaning that they're not referring back to the muftun, fuqaha, or the marja people. There's just this disconnect going on, and that's why they're...
This is a problem, and it's a constant issue, and some of it is because the people are in such a state of confusion, and then others it's purposeful, where they'll say, well, the time that we're in, we need to do this and this, or the time period that we live in, they're not really relevant because so and so. So they'll take someone that's releasing the shorts or the clips or whatever else that they see regularly online. They'll say, well, that person's relevant, but this faqih or this mufti, he's not relevant. It's like, well, no, you can't compare because of the depth of how you're seeing someone, the frequency that you're seeing someone online versus you've not seen someone in your real life. That one person's more relevant than the other. You can't use that as the basis of measuring truth, because there are a whole lot of mistakes that you're going to make if you use that as your measuring stick. There's a whole lot of errors you're going to fall into if you use those uneven scales, and those problems will constantly be there.
Because if you use this type of argument, then it means that whenever I'm home, when I'm researching some medical issues, some health issues, so I should be more relying upon the people online than my local doctor.
Yeah, and this becomes an issue. So, okay, well, I'll just order my medication online. It's like, well, you could do that, but the danger's inherent in that by just ordering your own medication online, by giving them your symptoms. The danger, or even self-diagnosing. Well, okay, well, I've got a tingling in my arm. So then you go online. Okay, what does tingling in arm mean? They find, okay, you have suffered a major brain injury. So you now look to attain medication. That's clot busting medication. Well, what if you don't have a clot? What if that's not the medication? What if you didn't have that? What if the tingling in your arm was because you slept wrong? Or what if it's because you haven't been getting enough sleep? Or it's nerve damage for another issue? Now you've harmed yourself.
Oh, yeah. I've had this multiple times where I've researched something like this, and the explanation is always way worse than what the doctor told me.
Yes.
It wasn't that bad in reality, but yes, I could have misdiagnosed myself.
Yes, and there could have been a whole matter of tribulations, because once you do that, you think, oh my Lord, I've got non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. Oh no. Well, what is the medication? Well, there's not really a medication. It's sort of end of life care. So now you start giving your goodbyes and telling people I've got lymphoma and all this other stuff, when you don't have that, or you misdiagnose yourself with one thing and you go to try to self-medicate, but you actually have something else, and it worsens that thing because the medication you're using for the thing that you self-medicated, self-diagnosed, is actually not that thing, and it doesn't go with that. So now you've hurt yourself. But slaves of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, some of them won't always listen. And it's the same thing with madhhabs. People will become partisan to things. But a lot of the and then this goes in line with what we were just discussing.
Mhm.
The people that become partisan to madhabs, they're not even following it though. It's the title of it. Oh, I'm this
Yes.
madhab, and it's just the title, but there's nothing. They don't know any of the detailed matters that they're supposed to about it.
Mhm.
They can't establish their wudu, the fara'id of the wudu, the sunan of the wudu, but they're just carrying this banner. It's this or nothing. We're better than everyone else. Yeah, we're so and so to the fullest. So and so team until the end. So and so madhab until I die, and all this other stuff, or so and
Yes.
so until Jannah, and all this other type of stuff. It's like, why would you engage in this type of rhetoric, especially when you're around
Mhm.
people that aren't that given madhab? Oh, we just like to have a little bit of fun with it. That's not fun. That's danger, because you're going to put people in situations where they wind up going away from you, or you do other things, and then people will assume, if you are putting yourself across as this banner carrier for your madhab, people will assume that you know about it. Then you falsely represent the madhab, or falsely narrate rulings that aren't from it, or other things. Then someone tries to follow you, and their wudu will be invalid, or their salah will be
Yes.
invalid, or other issues will be invalid. And this is the current issue that we see with
Yes.
ta'assub. The current spirit of the age is ta'assub. Yeah, we got to be this madhab to the fullest. And there are
Exactly.
people pushing the madhabs, but not only pushing them, but insisting on theirs to the degree that they disparage other madhabs.